Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Method to Our Madness podcast. I'm Stacey Merola, PhD, and I'm here with my co-host Bill Pate.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk about something that I think we've mentioned in almost every prior episode, but haven't defined, the logic model. And today to talk with us about logic models is our friend Deb Levy. And I'm going to let Deb introduce herself.
Sure. Thanks, Stacey, and thanks, Bill. I'm Deb Levy. We were just discussing when I met you all. I met Stacey. I guess I met Bill first then in we'll say 2008.
Oh,
And then I met when I was an independent evaluator, and then I met Stacey through a Washington Evaluators, and then we became colleagues eventually and still keep in touch and friends as well. But I've been in the evaluation space pretty much since I got out of grad school in 1997. I didn't study evaluation, but my first job was working on a series of drug court evaluations in different states, and quickly kind of took to the practice and really enjoyed it. And here I am so many years later, and I've worked in nonprofits, independent, government, and now private sector helping government clients.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Deb, you've probably made your share of logic models. How would you define a logic model?
I did think about that when you mentioned the topic about how it's like, when did I make my first logic model? But so a logic model is, I guess it's often referred to as a roadmap, a visual roadmap or graphic that kind of defines the relationships between resources, like what you need to run a program, activities, what you do day to day, and then ultimately the intended outcomes. And it illustrates the logical chain of cause and effect, often, I guess, referred to as a theory of change, as well as also, and the desired results. Yeah, just kind of, I guess, a roadmap of how to run a program.
And so, usually it details sort of like the inputs that the program provides, and then sort of your expected outputs, and then outcomes. They can be short term, long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they're usually read from left to right, which I guess has gotten some criticism in the past because I guess, some things are circular. But so,
Right. I think people also like to change things. Like it's something that's been used forever, so they feel like it should be able to be improved or look different or. But
that's true.
I've never really understood, but let's do it backwards. I think you can think about it backwards, but I don't think it should be designed backwards. But
Right,
that's
right.
my
Yeah. Saw a presentation once on 3D logic models, and it was kind of hard to follow. No offense to the 3D logic model folks, but it was just it's just sort of like it was a lot. So,
yeah. I think that's what makes people run away when they get complicated.
when they get
And
complicated.
and then I guess in terms like variations, like have you seen useful variations, Deb? And like things that you've seen, either as somebody who's like helping to develop it, or if you've ever reviewed logic models that have like come across your desk, have you seen like interesting variations where they do try to do something like nonlinear or anything like that?
I think most of the ones I've seen are linear. I think the variation I see is in how people are presenting them more. Like, is it a table, or are they making it in Visio or PowerPoint, trying to make it
Mm.
look more sophisticated or more interesting? I have seen like very complicated ones that maybe weren't linear, but I'm definitely not drawn to those. I always feel like I'm trying to make it more simplistic. I think anyone who doesn't understand what the logic model is about should be able to look at the logic model and understand what it's about. And if you look at it and it stresses you out, that's not a good
Not
sign.
working.
Right. It's not working. Go back to the word table. I think if it's a super complex problem, I mean, you really can't reduce it down to, six boxes or whatever. But I still think simple is better, at least, where you're starting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tend to think of it as like a very high level, like you said, roadmap, especially when you're trying to maybe like an executive summary or something, right?
Yeah.
Where you're trying to just be really clear about what the overall basic path is. And then
Mm-hmm.
I've seen like those get exploded and like there's like different aspects of it that are covered in different parts. But yeah, I definitely agree. If it gets incredibly complicated or, it's hard to fit on one page and it's hard to read, it's
Right.
gone beyond its utility.
For sure.
Yeah, because it is sort of a good tool for starting a discussion with stakeholders, I think, or extending the discussion. So
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe we could chat a little bit about experiences getting stakeholders to buy into the logic tunnel.
Right. Well, it reminds me too of like when I've done logic model trainings, you start with an audience that's a little bit resistant and why are we here? Why do I need to do this? And then so many come out excited that they did it and oh, I can use this here and I can use this here and it doesn't have to be for a program. I can do it in my life. I can, organize everything that way. And stakeholders seems to be the same thing. Like, why do I need to be involved in this process? I'm too busy. But once they go through it, they're happy they did.
Trying to think of how I could logic model my new life in New Hampshire.
You can. Well, the examples I think in evaluation trainings, like the vacation one, like you're going on a vacation, or like we want to bake a cake, and you make a logic model to bake a cake.
Right,
So.
right. Logic model to renovate my house in New Hampshire.
That may not be a
We could
simple
do.
logic
That would be
model.
one of those ones that's like a lot of
Is it
recursive,
linear?
right, linear. Got some curves in
Recursive.
there. Recursive.
Right. I don't know, pretty tangible outcomes and how to get there.
And I think people also get confused between logic models and the theory of change. I mean, it seems like the logic model has a little more description about core components of the program and things like that, where theory of change is at a higher level. But you kind of need both, right? Like,
Yeah, and I've been in discussions where which one comes first.
Mm.
I know one of our clients historically always did theory of change, then logic model, but then somehow it got reversed in different documents I've seen. So that sparked a whole discussion of does one have to be first, or can you do them simultaneously, or does one build off the other?
I
That's
don't know.
interesting. Yeah,
That's
I've never
interesting.
thought about it like that.
Yeah, I think I've thought the theory of change first, but I can see I could go the other way.
Yeah, I guess it depends on if you're making it inductive or deductive. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it probably depends on the circumstances because like
Mm-hmm.
they really don't know what they're wanting to do. And it's okay, well, let's just kind of map out what you're currently doing and why are you doing
Right.
this and what is this input and who does that involve?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start building it and then it's like, oh, okay, so if we were to look at what we actually do, one would presume the theory of change is X. And
Right.
is that what we really want? And then you can like go back and forth to like modify it.
Mm-hmm. And it does seem a lot of times that people just have logic models, and then the theory of change becomes like, oh, we're supposed to have a theory of change too. But it does seem like, oh, okay, well then why did this program even happen? Like, why?
Yeah, how did this happen?
Right. How did this happen?
Yeah, I actually got a small project one time because I was the only proposal that did not have a logic model. Isn't that crazy?
Oh,
That's
interesting.
they're
It,
like,
it
we want
set
the
me
one without the
apart.
logic model.
It set me apart, and so she was intrigued, and so she like called me in for an interview, and she's like, "Well, why didn't you do this?" And it's like, "Well, I think it's pretty straightforward, but also I can't just give you a generic one because what does that do? It's like if I base it strictly on a proposal, it's like okay, Bill knows how to build a logic model based on a proposal, and it's like okay, but that really
Oh, so
doesn't get
you
it.
mean you didn't include one in the proposal, not that you
Correct.
were, oh, okay. I thought you were
Yeah,
saying that you
I
wouldn't.
wasn't anti-logic model. I don't want to get on that bandwagon. No, I just didn't see the need in the proposal to put it in. But I did
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about, having meetings and, doing some discovery and figuring out, exactly what they wanted to do. And then we could like, map it out.
Yeah, that makes sense because I was always think you need to have a discussion with the stakeholders to really, hash out the logic model. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't
Yeah.
always have all the information based on what's in like an RFP. So
Right, right. Very true. And stakeholders often have very different ideas of what you're going to put in that logic model, which makes for a more fun discussion.
I don't know. What's the weirdest thing you've seen in a logic model?
The weirdest thing, I don't know. I don't know if I've seen anything super weird. I think the weirdest discussion I've been in about a logic model was when I worked at US Peace Corps and I was trying to design one for teaching English program. And one of the stakeholders who was the person who designed the program was very insistent that all of the outcomes were already happening. Like he couldn't talk about it in a way that, you know, the program in his mind, it was always going to do exactly what he set it out to do, even though it hadn't even really started to be implemented. But he couldn't talk about it as a, you know, what are you expecting and what might really happen? There was no separation between those two things. Yeah, that was a very hard discussion.
That's interesting. Yeah. When people are like, okay, these are going to be the outcomes. You know,
right. Right.
And no more.
And no more.
No,
this is it.
Right. And then there's always like the unanticipated ones that good or bad.
Good or bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings up a good point. Like that a logic model is sort of more of a living document than just, you know, like, okay, this is it. It's set in stone. It's forever.
Right. Right.
Really,
Yeah. No, definitely forever changing, especially, I mean, a new program that's no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. We talked a little bit with last week. We were talking with, or a couple of weeks ago, we talked with Alan about implementation fidelity and sort of like, you know, what they planned to do and then what they actually did, and sort of, you know, sometimes including in the logic model, like the tipping points, sort of like, okay, well, we need at least 3 days
right
to have an effect.
Yeah.
So yeah, there could be lots of changes as the program goes along.
So
how?
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Have you encountered any resistance with the idea of a logic model being open to being changed? I mean, outside of that one experience that you had where it's like, no, it's going to be exactly like this. There's nothing different. But aside from that, have you ever like worked with a client long enough where, you know, there's the initial logic model and it's okay, this is how things are going. And then like Stacey's talking about, you know, something weird happens or there's some disruption in the original plan. You know, people change, funding changes, something shifts, and then you need to amend the logic model or to say, okay, well, this was version one, but we need out of necessity to shift to this other version.
One example that comes to mind, when I was an independent evaluator, I was evaluating an after school tutoring program in DC. And I think the logic model already existed before I was brought on. But as I was working on the evaluation, it was pretty evident. It was mostly focus groups and some one-on-one interviews that the target audience was not who they were reaching.
Oh, okay.
So we had some discussions about, you know, where do we go from now? Do we want to tweak the logic model to make it more inclusive and not just target this one audience? And they were very resistant to changing it. I think because they thought it would impact funding for their next cycle. But, you know, but on the other hand, you're also not going to be meeting your outcome or achieving your outcomes. So,
yeah,
you know, it's
a
double-edged sword, I guess. But yeah, it shouldn't be a static document that's done once or done, you know, just for your funding. It's designed to help you, not just, you know, get you some more money.
So do you have tips for like new evaluators who are like, I need to put together my first logic model, like how to approach that?
Yeah, I think don't overthink it. Like it can be simple. Start with, you know, what you know and you understand. I think using the basic like goal. I know some people like goals and objectives, or just, you know, goal, activities, outputs, outcomes. Start from there, and I think build it out. Look at a lot of examples that exist. If it's something similar to what you're doing, I'm sure there's a whole bunch online. AI can probably build logic models now. I have not asked it to, but you know.
No. It's hallucinating an input.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, will AI understand outputs and outcomes, or will they still get confused? Like
right, even
else?
AI is confused.
Right. Yeah, I think I at least know when I learned about logic models, they did stress me out. I thought, like, I don't understand this, but they are very simple, and start with the basics and build it from there as you learn. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be super pretty.
It could just be columns or whatever. Right? It doesn't
exactly.
have to be.
Yeah.
So do you have tips for engaging stakeholders in the logic model creation process?
I think usually, well, getting their buy-in, first of all, whether that's, your client that you're working directly with, maybe they can help you with, but you've got to have stakeholder buy-in so they show up, whether it's in person or virtual. Everyone can bail on meetings.
Right.
So you want them to want to come and understand how it's going to help them, and that it's important that you get their feedback. And I think we even talked about earlier that some stakeholders are going to have different opinions than their colleagues, and that's okay. It's a matter of just talking through it and really getting to an understanding.
Yeah, I think when we had worked together, like having the interactive, I guess what was that? I can't remember the name of the program where people could like move the stuff around, like
Oh, yeah. I know Teams has a board, but we were using, now I can't remember what it's called, but there's a lot of different whiteboard programs. But yeah, well, you can move around stickies and
yeah, and
yeah.
sort of make it more of a really
Mhm.
interactive session instead of,
Yes, yeah. I still like
rare.
in-person whiteboard, people walk around with all their stickies, and I find those to be much more valuable. But I realize that's not also practical and doable with
Yeah,
people in different places. But yeah,
yeah. So make it a little more fun and interactive than just like,
right.
hey, here's this chart to look at.
Yeah, please review and get back to me in 24 hours.
Right.
Um, I think also too, having them like you said, build it out with stickies, but also understand what a logic model is first, not just jump into it like it's an activity, but how this is going to serve them or why you're doing this. And I think always walking through a simple example, whether it's a vacation or, baking a cake, does help people understand, even though sometimes it feels a little silly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, this is a tough one because like I remember when I was first learning about logic models, there was a really great resource. The Kellogg Foundation had put out a book. Well, I think it was put into book form, but kind of walking through like the purpose of a logic model and stuff like that. But I think it's mostly been book chapters in different resources where they kind of talk about it as like we're talking about it, not something static. It's a starting point. It's a good overview. It opens the conversation. I haven't had too many experiences walking through a logic model, like kind of like developing it from scratch with a client. I think it's always been, well, with the exception of that one example, I've always had like a draft and then it's like, okay, well, this is fine, but let's, add some stuff to it or get some clarification on things. And I think for me, it's mostly been because I'm more quantitatively oriented, much like Stacey is. And it's like, we're interested in what are the available outputs that we can actually access so that we can, do analyses on those parts at those time points when they become available so that, we're not trying to do all the data collection at the very
Mhm.
end and, rushing to get the report together. And I've always found that those conversations, they're really time consuming because it takes a while to like find the people you really need to talk to, having those conversations, and then like you're saying, Deb, like getting the buy-in so
Mhm.
that there's good cooperation and they understand that, we're not trying to do this in some like judgmental or auditing way. It's like, no, we're trying to help you tell the story
Right.
with the data and and this is what we're looking for, this is how we intend to report it. But it seems like a lot of times they're like, well, if I give you my data then you're going to know exactly what's going on or not going on, and they feel like like scared to hand it over.
Right.
So have you had any trouble like that with like outputs or getting people or convincing people about those different like aspects of the project?
Yes, I think, like you said, a lot of times people don't necessarily want to hand over data that's already been collected. But I think also they're afraid to admit that maybe it wasn't collected or they didn't do it properly. But also, you're there. Hopefully, you can do some new data collection or suggest some newer practices. But I think,
Mhm.
especially like in the smaller nonprofit world, where resources are scarce, so you have fewer people. they're not these sophisticated data collection processes. So we expect it to be a bit messy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess I do tend to think of logic models like Bill, sort of a guide and a guidepost or something for, the research questions and what you might, look at in your evaluation. But I think also, Bill, you brought up a good point about the like the timelines and stuff, because it's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean by short term? What do you mean by long term?
Right. And everyone has a different opinion, or, it depends. Is it based on a funding cycle, or is it based on how long you can get up and do things?
Right, exactly. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it till the interim report is due? Is it
Right. Well, I think long-term outcomes always became such a huge discussion, because a lot of times it was, well, this is outside of the, when this program will even exist, or the scope of this evaluation. Like, these are longer term conditional changes that you can't measure. But then, well, why have them then? Like,
Why have them in there?
and that brought up the whole impact versus outcome argument.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what might be confusing to folks sometimes is like when those two boxes that are sometimes included in the logic model related to like assumptions and external factors. And I guess, what do you put in them? So,
Right. As soon as you said external factors, I think of COVID and
COVID.
how that changed every evaluation that, while we were working together at that time. But
Yeah.
I mean, that was huge because that impacted so many different things in so many different areas too. So I feel like that was a external factor that constantly pops up, even in evaluation reports. Like, there seems to be a lot of sentences about that, or, we couldn't collect data during this time, or whatever it is. And then assumptions is, I guess, what you assume about the program, and that is related to the theory of change somewhat. Like,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and do you do those last, or do you do them first?
Right, yeah. Do you do them last? Do you do them first? Yeah, that's a good point, because the assumptions is sort of like, well, this logic model work assuming XYZ conditions, I guess.
Think of the tutoring program like that. Each tutor is matched to at least one person. 2T.
2T, right.
2T.
Yeah, no, COVID's a great example of external factors. I had been thinking of like, when schools maybe, in Houston or something got shut down because of various hurricanes or whatever,
Right.
then like that. So obviously that affects your evaluation of the programs there. So.
Right.
Yeah, especially when that external factor can just incredibly overwhelm any metrics that you were using. Because that happens so much with like a lot of reading measures over time and math performance measures. And it's like there's a design, or the intervention is, it's like, oh, well, they're going to do this like 20 minutes a day, like 5 days a week for like a month. And then, oh, but then COVID happened. And it's like,
Right.
okay, whatever effect you're expecting from this intervention is just going to get entirely engulfed by this external thing. So then how do we pivot? Maybe is something that like happens with a lot of these programs. It's like, well, we're not going to be able to do anything for a period of time. And I'm sure for a lot of people, it's like, as it was happening, it's like, we have no idea. And then what do you do? Do you just like have check-in meetings periodically and kind of like put stuff off, or it seems like it can be difficult. I think luckily for me, I had some projects where there were some built-in metrics and data that were just still happening. So the measurements were still going on and things were happening, and I guess you'd have to treat it almost like interrupted time series or something, or
before COVID and then after COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, and if we make it this particular day in my diagram or my chart, then we can see the pre and the post.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. COVID would make a great interrupted time series design. Anyway.
So I guess besides the actual logic model itself and developing it and working it out, Deb, do you find it to be a useful tool when you're writing the report? or even like sections of the report, maybe even like just the methodology part, or what other utility does the logic model have besides being a nice explanation of a high level overview of what was intended for the program?
I definitely think it's useful in the report writing phase. I know a lot of time it gets just stuck in the appendix as
Yeah.
something that was done and not referred to. But I think when you're presenting the findings and presenting the data, referencing back to the logic model is important in terms of like whether you're explaining, that an outcome was achieved and you're showing the data and then kind of referring back to like why those outcomes are there and what activities led to it. And also confirming that the activities did indeed happen, and that's why these outcomes likely occurred. Whereas, maybe those activities didn't happen and the outcomes still occurred, like that. You want to look at both of those scenarios. I think it's used through all phases. I think that's what makes it useful when people, use it throughout and not just in the beginning to understand the program and then move on. And then that also gets you back to, changing it. If it's an evaluation you're going to do each year, you're going to do, every 6-month follow-ups, tweaking it as you go along.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Thanks.
Bill, you did some work on systems change, right? Or
Yeah, some system stuff. I was interested in that. I co-wrote a book chapter related to, kind of sort of related to it. And our specific thing was deliberate stakeholder engagement.
yeah,
And so this was more of a monitoring and evaluation, like background. And so the person I was working with, that was their background. And so we were talking about it and developing this idea of taking into consideration a more systems approach, considering the interaction of different elements. And so I think it was useful for us in getting away from thinking of a logic model as kind of a static thing that's like one and done. Then also really looking at maybe the inputs and really questioning. It's like, do we have all the appropriate stakeholders at the table? Because unfortunately, a lot of funders, they're like, oh, yeah, so we're going to work with this group and this group and this group, and these representatives are going to be here. And then you're like, well, what about the people who are actually going to be directly impacted by this? Oh, well, we're just going to assume, X, Y, Z. And it's like, maybe that's not the best way to do it.
yeah,
But I think it's really hard, though, to like try and convince the funder. It's like, no, we need to just start over. We need to like really just like get to like step zero and make sure, do we have everybody in the room? So it is one of those things that I think can be useful if you have that kind of like that lead time built in. But unfortunately, I think at least here in the States, it seems like there is not a lot of that, lead time. It's like,
no,
nope, we're going to put out the
Yeah.
proposal on this date. We're, make a decision on this date. And part
yeah,
of the proposal is you're going to give us a logic model. We're going to have a kickoff meeting in the first week. We're going to give you a bunch of data, that first month. And it's like, okay, I'm going, I guess, through the motions on a lot of this. But yeah, it does like, I guess that in that case, that assumptions box gets really full of like, this will positively impact these groups of people, and this is why we believe it.
yeah. I was
So,
gonna ask if you were getting into like the nested logic models and all
oh no, no,
or
we weren't doing
you
anything
were like, no,
complicated.
no.
No, our first thing was just like deliberate stakeholder engagement, I think was the concept that we are playing with, talking about how important it was. And I think that concept got some traction because we were just doing the intersection of systems with like traditional evaluation. And it's it's weird. It's like it's well known in certain parts of the world and it's not well known in others. And so it wasn't like it was a brand new thing. It was just, let's kind of like get back to basics, but kind of like open it up a little bit more. So
Your comment about how like that we don't always have that much lead time. It sort of reminds me of for the listeners. I don't know if you know if I'm a musician, but I remember hearing a quote from David Grohl. Don't bore us, get to the chorus, and I feel like
Funny.
Don't bore us with this logic model stuff.
Right. It's like, let's just get to work. It's like, why do we need to talk about like the
Why do
big
we need to
picture?
talk about this?
I'm trying to think closing thoughts. I think maybe just as difficult as it is to engage the right stakeholders and get their buy-in, it's very important and will pay off in the end, because if they're not involved in the evaluation from the beginning, they're not going to love being involved partway through when they haven't had a say in things. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
spend the time up front to work on the logic model with people.
Makes sense. All right.
Cool.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. If you have any questions for us or Deb, or you can find us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, and we all have websites. So, yeah, so thanks, Deb, for joining us.
Of course, happy to be here.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Bye.